So now we're going to talk about demand and supply in financial markets specifically. And when we're talking about financial markets, we have to define some terms. When we're talking about savings, this is really talking about the supply of financial capital. When we're talking about borrowing, this is really talking about the demand of financial capital. Financial capital are economic resources that we measure in terms of money. When we borrow money, we have to pay something called an interest rate. An interest rate is the price of borrowing. And it is some sort of rate. Obviously, interest rate, some sort of rate. We don't need to write that. Price of borrowing. So what does this look like in graph form? So again, we always have price on the y-axis, right? For this one, it's the price of borrowing. So we're going to have the interest rate on the y-axis. It's going to start off at 0%, never going to go further than 25%. And then on the x-axis, we're going to have the quantity of financial capital. Usually in billions of dollars. Oh, this thing keeps jumping around on me. Come on now. And so we end up with a demand curve for financial capital that looks something like this. We have a supply curve for financial capital that looks something like this. And where X marks the spot, we end up with a market clearing interest rate of 15%. And this equates with $600 billion of financial capital provided in the United States. So if our interest rate was higher, if our interest rate was somewhere like 21%, right, then we would end up with this surplus situation, right? A surplus of money here. If our interest rate was lower, say 13%, we would end up with a shortage. So people seeing the shortage are going to do what? They're going to save more. So the quantity demanded, the quantity supplied, the quantity demanded of financial capital, in a similar way to labor markets and other markets, they're going to equilibrate themselves to whatever that market clearing interest rate is because of the pressures of shortages or surpluses within the particular market. So not going to be a lot of questions on the financial capital part, probably more questions related to the labor market part when we're talking about the midterm exam. Questions on demand and supply of financial capital. Okay. So, one last thing. We do see price ceilings in this world of financial modeling. So there are things called usury laws. And these are laws that say how much interest rate you can charge. So let's say there was a usury law that came into effect and was at 12%. You can't charge more than 12%. What is this going to do? This is going to mean that the amount of capital supplied is less than the required capital demanded. And so this particular situation, we would end up with a shortage of financial capital as a result of this binding usury law. And this thing is a price ceiling, meaning that nothing can be charged above it. So usury laws are another form of price ceilings. Questions on usury laws, shortages, and price ceilings and how it relates to financial markets. Just keeping it pretty basic. All right, that's all I got for you today.